We have talked through how to draft quarterbacks, how to draft running backs, and wide receivers. Leaves one position left, and it's everyone's favorite. Time to break down how to draft tight ends to win your best ball tournaments. Welcome to Summer School Club Fantasy's Best Ball podcast, streaming exclusively on YouTube. I am your host, Austin Amandolia, and here with me, as always, is Matt Record. Matt, how are you doing?
I am doing great, talking about one of the most fun positions here in tight ends, and excited to get to it.
Yeah, I feel like the tight end position, there's always an edge that can be had. It's like every year, do you go the elite tight end? Do you just punt the position? How do you navigate it? It's a really fun one to navigate for best ball leagues. But don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you can see every episode. Episodes are now airing at Saturdays at 11 a.m. We have content coming to you at this channel every day covering redraft, dynasty. We have mock drafts. We have DFS golf. We'll have DFS football coming to you during the season, so you really should be subscribed. Also, make sure you're looking out for our cram session episodes where we're breaking down every single one of the week 17 matchups, previewing those matchups so you know which players to target and which games to target for your optimal lineups in best ball. As I mentioned, we are continuing our positional breakdown, discussing the strategy behind drafting each position. If you drop questions in the chat or in the comments, we will get to them in the following episodes. Tonight, we are focused on the tight end position. And we are going to start with the basics, assuming you've never played best ball a day in your life. But then we're going to get a little bit into the weeds, get a little bit advanced, level up for the people who have been here before, who understand what's going on in the best ball streets. So first, Matt, when you're drafting in best ball leagues, how many tight ends are you drafting?
I am almost always drafting three. I feel like that's the sweet spot. Not to foreshadow too much about who I'm trying to draft, but I like the volume of the three. How about you?
Yeah, I am almost exclusively drafting three tight ends at this point as well. I will do two tight ends depending on who the tight ends are. But I am more often than not going in that 2 to 3 route. And I've started to really lean on 3 tight end builds, particularly because last year there was a clear advantage to be had by having 3 tight end builds. So last year, 47.6% of the field drafted 3 tight ends. That said, 49% of teams that advanced had 3 tight end builds, and 53.5% of teams who made the finals had 3 tight end builds. So it was clearly advantageous to get to the final, you needed to have 3 tight ends. Now, that doesn't mean that people with 2 tight ends still weren't getting there. It just wasn't happening as high of a rate. So the field drafted 2 tight ends 47.8% of the time. Teams that advanced was actually a little bit lower. It was only 46.8% of the time. And finalists, only 41% of finalists had 2 tight end builds. So last year in particular, there's a clear advantage to having 3 tight ends. I think there's some reasons behind that. Like some of the elite tight ends failed last year. And so that definitely plays a role in those 2 tight end builds not going so well. But there's still an advantage, and we should take note of that. Now, Matt, we asked this question with quarterbacks. We have to ask it with tight ends. Are you ever drafting only 1 tight end or 4 or more tight ends?
Never. I'm never doing that. 1 tight end is just silly in the regard of just the bye week. Like you're already putting up a goose egg for one position, right? Not saying that you can't, like, if you're dominant everywhere else, make up for it elsewhere, but that's just silly. And then four is too much, especially when we're talking a lot of these underdog leagues where we're required to start, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs. Like your roster spots should not go to a tight end position that is not even premium scoring for them. So no.
Yeah, I am very much with you. Just to be very clear about why you shouldn't draft 1 tight end. First off, you're going to have 1 week where you just get a goose egg at the tight end position. That's not going to work for you. Second off, you may think we don't need to talk about this. We need to talk about this. The reason is out of the 670,000 entries last year in Best Ball Mania, there were still 8,774 players or rosters that only had one tight end. One of them made it to the final.
Wow.
That person needs to actually play the lottery, honestly. Beyond that, when it comes to 4, there can be some advantages to 4 tight ends, but I'm not doing it most of the time. The advantages honestly show up more in the finals than they do in advanced rates. So it's harder for teams to advance if they have 4 tight end builds. So there are some rare cases, particularly if you are waiting a really long time to draft your tight end. I could see just stacking 4 like in the last 4 rounds of a draft, but it's not a strategy I'm going after, particularly given the tight end environment this year where tight end values are depressed, which leads us right into our next topic. All offseason, all I've heard about tight ends is that this is the best the tight end position has ever been. It's been deeper than ever before. And it's true. I have a little sarcasm in my voice, but it's true. But what does that mean for us in best ball? First off, Matt, do you buy that this is the best the tight end position has ever been? And based on that, how are you drafting? How are you treating tight ends this year?
So yeah, I think I agree with that statement. Much like quarterbacks, I am very comfortable waiting to get my tight end 1 while other people grab like the top tier guys, because people in tight end 8, Evan Ingram, he was a monster last year. George Kittle,
Yeah.
you can get him as tight end 7. Jake Ferguson, Dak Prescott, he had the most targets in the red zone of any tight end. He's going off the board as tight end 9. And then Brock Bowers, the nice shiny new toy there in Las Vegas, very highly anticipated rookie, right? But these are all guys that I feel relatively comfortable with being my tight end, right?
Yeah.
So it's super, super deep. How it's impacting my strategy, I'm waiting again. I'm waiting. I'm taking 2 of these top 15 guys or so, probably 2 in like the tight end 7 to 15 range, and hoping that stack works instead of relying just on one of the top guys.
Yeah, I really love that. And that's already leading right into our next set of topics we're going to discuss. I'm with you though. I do think the tight end position is the deepest it has been. There are some guys though in that top 8 that I feel they are fragile. So I do think it is deep, but I think there are some potential pitfalls that could be had with some of these guys that we're projecting a major leap forward. That said, it is a deep position this year. Like you said, Evan Ingram is kind of the epitome of this. The fact that he had the passing volume he got last year and is still just the tight end 8 is honestly kind of wild. Like he led tight ends. Didn't he like break a record for most receptions by a tight end in a season? Like
I believe so.
I never expected that to come from Evan Ingram, but here we are. It's 2024, and Evan Ingram now holds the record for most receptions by a tight end. So given the depth of the position, I think it's important for us, particularly this year, to talk about when should we be drafting our first tight end, because it's often been like Travis Kelce is in the first round. And for a long time, it's been just like you take Travis Kelce or you wait, more or less, right? Like for years now, it's been clear he's been topping away the best, but he's not even currently the tight end 1 by ADP on Underdog right now. He's the tight end 2 behind Sam LaPorta. So Matt, you mentioned that you're kind of waiting on tight end. I'm curious, what round are you looking at targeting for your first tight end?
Yeah, obviously, it depends on who falls where. So all of this is, dependent on what's going on in the draft board. But I'm typically looking round 5 or 6 after I have a pretty good stable of wide receivers and running backs. Sort of the hero running back build. Yeah, for me, it's usually around 5 or 6 when it's like, okay, let's see which tight ends are still available.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good strategy. And honestly, that worked out for folks pretty well last year. That's a pretty common time to snag your first tight end. And in fact, the interesting thing about this is teams that advanced, they got their first tight end at a pretty similar place that the field did. So the field, let's go with tight ends, your first tight end by the 8th round. So the field drafted their first tight end by the 8th round, 59% of the time last year. teams that advanced to the playoffs did it 58% of the time. So let's say like a marginal difference. I don't see a significant advantage or disadvantage between the two. What I will say is interesting is that finalists waited even longer. They only got their first tight end by the eighth round 42% of the time. And I think some of this is a little bit about the tight ends that popped off last year. If you were fortunate enough to draft our boy Sam LaPorta, your tight end 1, or our other boy Trey McBride, tight end 3 on the year this year, those guys were not going in the first 8 rounds last year. And so it was clear that there was an advantage to having gotten a big value last year on these tight ends that we thought could have some upside and then panned out. I don't think that's going to be as much of a strategy this year because I don't think there are as many tight ends who we would expect to take that leap this year. So I think that round 5 to 6 range, making sure you have good receivers, maybe having an anchor running back, and then getting your tight end in those first 6 rounds, I think is a good strategy this year. Matt, I'm curious, since we've talked about this, I'm throwing you a new question kind of on the spot. Is there a tight end, let's say outside of the top 10 by underdog rankings, that you think could make a Sam LaPorta, Trey McBride type jump this year? We're talking guys like David Njoku, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet. We'll skip TJ Hawkinson because that's kind of a unique situation. Luke Musgrave, any of these names, Hunter Henry, are any of these guys you think could be worth waiting on and have that potential upside of a Trey McBride or Sam LaPorta?
Short answer, no. I like some of these guys in terms of their ability to be maybe a top 10 guy, but I mean, all of these, there's a lot of question marks with those names and a lot of diversification of offensive weapons on those teams, right? Like I love Luke Musgrave at tight end 17. However, and it's great for best ball because the Packers just have a bevy of options everywhere. Who knows who's going to be any given week? So I imagine he'll have some top 5 weeks, right? But tight end 17 feels right. I mean, I guess maybe Pat Freiermuth, like assuming there's better QB play in Pittsburgh, whomever it is, being better than Kenny Pickett, could be a top 10 guy. But no, I don't know if any of these names super excite me to the level of like, oh, they'll be top 5 for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that last year was a bit of an anomaly, and I think we would get in trouble if we try too hard to replicate that this season. So I'm going a little bit more this year with, let me find a tight end. Particularly, I love getting a tight end that I can stack with my quarterback, whether it's a late tight end or an early tight end. So I like, getting one of those first 8 guys, honestly, as like an anchor. That feels really good to me. And then obviously I will, depending on the league, how the roster, how the draft is going, sometimes I'll wait a little bit longer. But I think there is something to be said about getting one of those top 8 tight ends this year. Similarly, though, you draft your first tight end, and we hear it every year. People love to go bully tight end. And I know our friend Kelly Singh, in particular, loves the bully tight end route. She does it in DFS all the time. But for you, when are you drafting your second or third quarter or tight end after you've drafted that first one?
Yeah, again, super dependent on who I got, right? So if I spent the draft capital on a Sam LaPorta or McBride or Kelsey, you have to, as we always talk about it, assume you're right in these best balls, and they will be carrying your team the entire time. If they go down, you're kind of screwed anyway. So we'll be even later, right? But my strategy, which again, 5th or 6th round, drafting one of those, I think you put it nicely, one of those top 8 guys, I'm typically looking to get no later than like the tight end 14, which right now is about the 11th round, 11th, 12th round. So usually around then.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And I think the important thing here to note is bully tight end is not really an optimal strategy. And let's talk about why just for a quick moment. Where you got to think about the opportunity cost of what players are you giving up in order to draft that player. So if you decided you wanted to draft Sam LaPorta and Travis Kelce and have both of them, you are going to be giving up on most likely one of Michael Pittman, Tank Zell, Josh Allen, George Pickens, Isaiah Pacheco, Amari Cooper, Jalen Hurts, T. Higgins, Travis Etienne. These are all guys who could be really valuable at their position. And one of those guys, Travis Kelce or Sam LaPorta, is very likely to be putting a 0 on your roster in most weeks because you only get to start one tight end. You get a flex position, but if that tight end doesn't outscore a running back or a receiver, they're getting a goose egg, and you just wasted a roster spot within the first 6 rounds. To drill down on this just a little bit more, it is still a common strategy that people will take. First off, 102 people in last year's Best Ball Mania took 2 tight ends in the first 2 rounds, which wild. 6,900 had 2 tight ends by round 6 in the overall field. That was about just under 2% of players in the field. Only 1.7% of players who advanced to the playoffs had drafted a tight end, 2 tight ends by round 6. What I think is most important and most notable here in those playoff weeks where upside is so important, 0 teams who drafted 2 tight ends by round 6 made it to the finals. And that's where all the money is in these contests. So it could help you advance. It's maybe not even the best strategy to help you advance, but you could advance, but you might not have the upside. And when you're playing in these tournaments, you're playing to win. So I agree with Matt. I don't recommend going after it. And honestly, you can wait a really long time on that second tight end based on trends for last year. 67% of finalists had 2 tight ends by the time they got to round 14. Like, that is pretty late in draft. And there's a lot of value to be had there because a lot of times with the tight end position, on a site like Underdog Fantasy, you just need one of those guys that's going to fall into the end zone because touchdowns are so important. So as a reminder, when you're drafting tight ends, you should draft 2 to 3. There has been a slight advantage towards drafting 3 in recent years. But if you get one of those elite guys, it's totally reasonable to go with 2. Don't draft 1. Only draft 4 if you have done a ton of lineups and you're like, yeah, I want to do a 4 tight end build. I don't if you're drafting 1 lineup, don't draft 4 tight ends. It's not your best strategy. It's not putting your best foot forward, most likely. But if you have a ton of lineups and you're building a portfolio, sure, try it once or twice. But it might not be the most optimal strategy. Draft your first tight end. We think getting one of those first 8 tight ends off the board is the way to go this year. And then that second or third tight end, you can wait till round 12 or later to build out the rest of your tight end room. Honestly, there's some tight ends that I love that are going undrafted most of the time. So you can really, really wait on some tight ends this year. So now we're going to get to our tracking off-season narratives segment. I've got 3 for you this week. And these are the boys. These are the guys that we love to talk about, I think, between the 2 of us. So, by the way, shout out to the Twitter page at 32 Beat Writers. That's the numbers 32. If you don't follow them, you should be following them. They do a really great job aggregating all of the content from the beat writers across the NFL. And I got some great snippets on these 3 players. So first, we're going to start with some reporting by Amna Sapan and Tori McElhaney on the Atlanta Falcons. And it's really, really beautiful because they have this little nice subtitle in here that says quarterbacks have their favorites, talking about these Falcons quarterbacks. And here's the quote. Kirk Cousins found Kyle Pitts time and time again in front of fans. They connected on a number of different routes that resulted in 4 catches through a few 11-on-11 periods. One in particular saw Cousins throw a dime to Pitts as he tiptoed the sideline. The pass perfectly placed between Nate Landman and coverage in the sideline. Side note, apparently Michael Penix really likes Rondale Moore. That's just, put that in your pocket, just in case. So, Kirk Cousins finding Kyle Pitts time and time again. Matt, does this mean the Kyle Pitts train is finally taken off?
The Kyle Pitts train is finally taken off. Yeah, I mean, I said this last year, I think in the same episode, I will die before I give up on Kyle Pitts. I will die. But he's coming off the board as tight end 6. So, I mean, in the past, he was going as high as, tight end 3, where I had to put a lot of draft capital to get him. But this might be the perfect time, right? You're only going to have to, he's going around in the 5th round. He's one of those guys. I will wait for Kyle Pitts. He has a real quarterback now. Kirk Cousins has supported some real nice tight ends in the past. So I don't see any reason why this can't be the year that he, finally puts together.
I love that that Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder are just catching strays out here. Kyle Pitts finally having a real quarterback. But I agree with it. I'm also in on Kyle Pitts. The thing that fascinates me too about Kyle Pitts this year is like the Dalton Kincaid hype. Is that hype train is going off? When I was looking for content on tight ends this week, I saw all sorts of coverage about Josh Allen connecting to Dalton Kincaid boxing out defenders, blah, blah, blah. He only scored 3 points more in half PPR scoring than Kyle Pitts last year. So to me, I'm like, they seem interchangeable. Kyle Pitts was hurt these past 2 years. I feel like there's an opportunity for Kyle Pitts to take off. I'm buying into this hype, and I believe it when I see that Kirk Cousins is trying to develop a relationship with Kyle Pitts. He likes his tight ends. He's coming from a system that is similar in many ways, right? Bobby Slowick, very similar tree coming that Kevin O'Connell is coming from. So it's going to be a similar offense, similar number one target, have the tight end involved. Like there's a lot going here for Kyle Pitts to finally have that breakout season. So I love taking him at his value. The next one, now this one I think is really fun. So this was reported on by Jeff Zybrock with The Athletic. And this was a quote that came from Todd Monken, who is the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. And he was talking about their 2 tight ends, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And he said, quote, Todd Monken said, "You're obviously trying to get your best playmakers on the field, and they're 2 of them," referring to Likely and Andrews. "Those 2 guys are unique weapons, so we have to do a job of being creative, getting them on the field and finding a way to utilize them." I found this incredibly fascinating, Matt, when I read it, because there's a lot of them language in this. Like both of these guys, we need to get them on the field. Not, we need to get Mark on the field, make sure he's healthy and got help, and we need to get Likely on the field. No, it was just we need to get them. We need to get both of them on the field at the same time. Sounds like they're going to be running a bunch of 2 tight end sets. Before I get your thoughts on this, Matt, I just want to throw out there, the reason this is important is Mark Andrews is going as tight end 4 off the board towards the end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th round. Isaiah Likely is way down as tight end 22 on the board. ADP is around 180. It's going way after the 10th round, in around I think that's like the round 14, 15 range off the top of my head. So it sounds like they're both going to be on the field. Does change or influence how you are drafting Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely?
No, because I think they're already being drafted where they should be being drafted.
Nice.
I guess. Well, okay. No, I guess I'm a little higher on Likely then. Because again, the tight end 22 in the 5-6 weeks where Andrews went down last year, Likely went the heck off. Like if you had him, which was probably free, you probably did really nice. Probably did really nicely. So we know that the Ravens offense will be able to support at least 1 tight end. However, when Likely and Andrews were both on the field, Likely didn't do a whole bunch of anything. So to me, I would not rely on Likely as being like, he's going to be on the field. He'll be a top 15 tight end when both of them are healthy. Because again, that offense has like a bunch of weapons. You don't really know who's going to be any given week. However, if you were to, I could be convinced of taking Likely as maybe my tight end 3, kind of like the real dart throw, where in case Andrews, who's getting up there in age, goes down, now all of a sudden you have a top 5 guy. So I think tight end 22 is about right. I wouldn't reach much more for that because you're kind of, in my opinion, not hoping, you never hope for an injury, but you're kind of reliant on an injury to Andrews for him to really go off. But he's proven that he can do it. So right around that 20 spot makes sense for me.
Okay, so would you draft?
Would you stack them? I was going to ask you the same question. That's tasty. I mean, I'd consider it. I'd consider it because
I won't say no.
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's a really good take as well. Just overall, thinking about their ADPs, I do think because of the output we've seen, like Mark Andrews is still going to clearly be the lead tight end in this league, on this team. I don't think that his tight end one spot is in jeopardy. So I think maybe I would prefer him to fall a little bit, but he still has such great upside. He has tight end one upside any given week and on the season overall. So I definitely, it's not making me shy away from Mark Andrews. It also wouldn't make me afraid to take both of them because honestly, the receiver room doesn't scare me too much. Like, I feel like both guys could have weeks where they pop off or they both get in the end zone and they're going to both be performing in your lineup. So if you do that, make sure that you pay attention to your third tight end's bye week because otherwise you're going to be screwed on that front. But I thought it was interesting to know they're both going to be on the field. And I think it does mean that Isaiah Likely is a nice value where he's going off the board. Now, this last news headline that I pulled kind of for my co-host, catering to my co-host, making sure that he's having a good time. Jordy McElroy for Patriots Wire wrote an article about some training camp news here recently. And the little subheading in this article I thought was really, really fun. It was, "Don't forget about Hunter Henry." Here's what she had to say about it. "There has been so much talk about receiver issues in New England. People often forget how reliable Hunter Henry has been. He's had a solid training camp up to this point, and one of the highlights is this dominant one-on-one rep he had against veteran safety Jalen Hawkins on Thursday. Henry should be even better." This is the critical part. "He should be even better in offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt's system. Van Pelt leaves heavily on the run game and play action passing plays, which should lead to a significant uptick in the tight end usage for the Patriots." So, Matt, sounds like all aboard the Hunter Henry train.
I mean, I love that for many reasons. He finished last year as tight end 17 in pretty standard scoring. He's going off the board as tight end 18, which is about right. But the key thing with him is very boomer bust. Like, it's very touchdown dependent. Last year, obviously, terrible quarterback play, the worst quarterback play between the bevy of quarterbacks that played for the Patriots. We expect, it sounds like Jacoby Brissett is going to be the guy for a little bit as Drake May kind of figures it out. But I for my own sanity, it can't be worse. It can't be worse than it was last year. So all the scheme stuff aligns with, tight end being heavily used. Hunter Henry's very consistent. He'll have these boom weeks, and especially if the offense is just a little more competent, he'll have more red zone targets as well. So where he's going off, he's a guy that, again, he's not going to be a top 5 guy. He's not going to do the LaPorta thing or the McBride thing, but you could, I think, easily make the case that he's a top 10 guy at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about the type of usage he gets and why it's so important for underdog fantasy. He, as you said, he was like tight end 18 last year. He scored 99 fantasy points in half PPR scoring on 6 touchdowns. Now, that is only 17 fewer points than Dalton Kincaid scored last year in the same scoring system. Dalton Kincaid did this, though, catching 73 passes and 2 touchdowns. So the way Hunter Henry is going to get the job done is going to be different than some of these guys like Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, etc., Travis Kelce. It's going to be primarily through end zone targets. And honestly, I love that for the site because any week that he scores a touchdown, he's probably adding points to your lineup. And frankly, it wouldn't shock me if Hunter Henry ended the season with 10 touchdowns. If you told me that, I wouldn't bat an eye at that. I'd be like, yeah, I mean, that tracks for the type of usage he gets. I might not think he's tight end 1 at that point, right? Like, it's not going to change our draft next year necessarily, but him getting 10 touchdowns in a season does not feel anywhere out of the picture for me. So that is going to be all for this week. Before you go, reminder to hit subscribe, like, turn on those notifications. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Club Fantasy FFL. And go to our website at clubfantasyffl.com. We go live every day. If you're looking to practice what we discuss on this show, don't forget to check out Masterclass, our best ball drafting podcast, which airs Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Dynasty shows that air Sundays, Thursdays, and we have mock drafts that happen Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays. Our DFS golf show goes live on Tuesdays, and we have our flagship show, no pun intended, airing on Wednesday. And don't forget, our DFS podcast will be back when the season starts. You need to be following us because we bring all the content you need for your fantasy leagues. For Matt Record, I am Austin Amandolia. This has been Summer School. And remember, until next time, remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and best ball makes money. We'll see you next time.